wizards from young Sherlock Holmes and Willow. Evil comes in all sizes, from the Puppet Master.
Since you're watching this, it's safe to assume that you're a horror fan like me. You've probably also stumbled upon some gems that have flown under the mainstream radar while perusing the video cassette shelves at your local store. And nestled in the horror landscape, there's a flick that carved its own niche and marked a dynasty's inception. One of the greatest goddamn long-running low-budget series out there. Enter Puppet Master. Now, I should state that Full Moon peaked in the 90s. Their era wasn't really the 80s, but Puppet Master and their Full Moon motto is the direct result of the ingenuity and creativity born out of the 80s. Now let's go back to 1989. The horror scene is ripe with slashers and supernatural terrors. From Mr. Krueger babysitting in Dream Child to Jason taking Manhattan via Vancouver. The times were, well, not to sound cliched, but they were a-changin'. And then out of the shadows comes a movie that's literally a cut above the low-tier chum of its contemporaries. Enter Full Moon Entertainment, the brainchild of legendary filmmaker and entrepreneur Charles Band. With Puppet Master, Band didn't just unleash a movie, he birthed an empire. I have a story similar to many, one that we share deep into the core of 80s horror fandom, and kids especially. Finding your movie for the evening. Back in the early 90s, I would be given enough cash to rent 2 movies on a good weekend, maybe 3 if my parents were feeling generous. And so my sister and I would easily spend over an hour and a half looking over every case, front and back, determining what bets were to be made that evening. And as Band would become famous for, there it was, Puppet Master. An eerie and intriguing cover that sold the experience with the killer tagline, "Evil comes in all sizes." A big part of its success and longevity comes down to the ingenious cover, an open antique trunk showing off 5 unique pint-sized killers. The artistic vibe of these old hand-drawn posters just hits a little different. I know you're thinking, no shit, but there is a whole new generation who didn't grow up with these types of art, and so, like most things in life, are fading out of the outskirts of time. Full Moon Entertainment was savvy when it came to marketing. Band always had a guerrilla-style approach to promoting his films. The guy's a natural-born salesman, leveraging eye-catching cover art with cool and slightly schlocky taglines. The studio piqued the curiosity of all of us. Kids like me, older brother.
Grew up in this kind of small Midwest town. And we were the first ones of my friend group that got a VCR and had like the bigger TV. Now, again, in today's standards, that TV is nothing, but in our house, like we were the first ones. We were the first ones to have cable. I remember when my dad subscribed to HBO, and like all my friends would come over for that. But one of these kind of rituals that my family did every single Friday is they let me go to the local video store and pick out whatever movies I wanted, which was great because, you know, they were very liberal and progressive as it related to not putting these insane restrictions on me to watch things. And so it became this routine that every Friday we would go to Blockbuster and I would get to go, and I chose solely on the box art of a movie. And I don't remember when Blockbuster started, if it was I don't remember when it was, late 80s or early 90s, whenever that was, but all of the movies that I would gravitate to were 80s horror things. I mean, when you would see the box of Critters or Ghoulies of these things coming out of a toilet, I was like, that. I went that. And this was, you know, before the days of IMDb. You couldn't just, you couldn't look up what this was, so it was based solely on the box art. And so for me, I think that my love of these kind of 80s horror films stemmed from VHS cassette tapes and box art. If, you know, I probably missed some amazing gems because they didn't have great box art, but I saw everything that was exploitative, sexualized or violent on the cover of a Blockbuster movie. Every time.
But Puppet Master didn't end up being what I thought, and it's something I've always respected and appreciated. There is a strangeness to it all. Writers Kenneth J. Hall and Joseph G. Collodi go all in with a story that's far more distinctive and charming than it has any right to be. Toss in some creepy killer marionettes, knock a few folks off, and we're having a good time. No need for more. But here we mix Egyptian magic, killer puppets, grumpy psychics, a sinister hotel, and Nazi spies for good measure. Please do me a favor and listen to that again. Now tell me that doesn't sound like an absolute blast. The surprising charm of Puppet Master is that odd psychic angle. We get an elaborate for a tight 90-minute low-budget flick about ancient magical spells, workplace betrayal, and a healthy amount of horniness. My favorite. It could just easily work with the sexual overtones, suspicious characters, and supernatural sci-fi elements. Yet adding killer puppets makes things even wilder. It's a genius move that elevates this from your run-of-the-mill slasher to a peculiar and enduring style that would define Full Moon Entertainment. They didn't need big budgets to deliver their style of storytelling. All they needed was one or two good sets, a little creativity, and a dash of psychic energy. And a quick side rant, if you loved this movie like me, let us admit that the days of youth are gone. We can see things a bit more clearly, the patterns of the universe become more apparent, and the foundation of truth must be upheld. Okay, good. Now let's admit that the puppets were never really the bad guys. Did they kill the innocent? Sure, but it's always at the hands of a controller. Hell, Rick basically hangs out with the puppets when he brings them back in part 4. Why? Because the man is chill and has no ill intent. By part 3, they're fighting Nazis, and in this, they turn on their master once he becomes a dick. I'm just saying, I think it's time that we admit that they are far more tragic than they are evil. Now, Full Moon was the cheap and fast model of the home video market way back when, so there were always a few things that didn't work effects-wise. But what earned them respect was that Full Moon always tried to look and feel big on a modest budget. Long before the days of CGI, Puppet Master relied on good old-fashioned puppetry, prosthetics, and an iconic look. Pinhead has the style of a 40s bandit that may rob you in an alley, while Leech Woman has the appearance of a haunted doll. Look at Blade and you see his style takes after a Nazi colonel, while Tunneler has the standard look of a soldier. Jester is, well, a jester. And let's be honest, he kinda just sits there and looks. My dude doesn't really lend a helping hand. Maybe grab a knife or something. Sorry Jester fans, but he is not pulling his weight like he should. We get fun scenes like Tunneler drilling toward a slow-to-move Carissa. Clearly, budget constraints were a factor, and everyone had to work quickly and efficiently. Yet this is a fine example of how to make every special effects scene count. David Allen worked wonders with what he had, and created some of the most memorable-looking mini-killers. The puppets are only in the movie for about 7-ish minutes, obviously because of budget, yet it was enough to spark a series, with sequels still being released to this day. Now let's get back to the Charles Band of it all. With over 280 films and around 50 directorial gigs under his belt, it's safe to say that he's left a pretty big mark, and the man is still working as we speak. But what first made his name famous amongst my generation was his becoming the cult king of the early video store. To make a long story incredibly short, in 1977, Band caught wind of Andre Blais, who was shaking things up in the home video scene by licensing films for distribution. Band saw his chance and decided to jump in, creating his own label for indie cult flicks, like Media Home Entertainment, named after his ex. Oh, you sly SOB. And Wizard Video. But life wasn't all smooth sailing for Band. The 80s hit hard. Financial woes, alongside a shady friend/business partner named Edward Sarlouis, put Band's Empire Pictures to bed. The company was gutted and sold for parts. But that's what I've always respected and loved about the man. He would simply shake it off and reinvent himself. He's the cost-effective Bowie of the small and weird. Despite the setbacks, he kept pushing forward, and in 1988 he dove headfirst into the direct-to-video business, starting Full Moon. And the one big thing that really helped Band was teaming up with Paramount Pictures. Thanks to Paramount's massive distribution network, Band negotiated a deal that combined Paramount's distribution power with Full Moon's knack for promotion. The collaboration not only boosted the visibility of their movies, but also helped cultivate a loyal and decades-spanning fan base. Starting off with what would be the company's flagship series, Band didn't just create a movie, but launched a brand. Full Moon became synonymous with offbeat horror, churning out a steady stream of cult classics that captured the imaginations of the video store generation. And here I am today, paying back the favor. And what was his first movie under his new title? Puppet Master, of course. There's a scene that defines everything here, one that I've always loved, one that makes the movie great, silly, and iconic. I'm of course talking about the ending. The reveal of Jimmy F. Skaggs' Neil being alive. Sure, it's telegraphed 100 miles down the road, but his dinner party reveal is the type of over-the-top drama that I love. A Bond-esque detailed report of his master plan, while surrounded by all of his victims, killed courtesy of his loyal puppets. It's glorious and cheesy in all the right ways. By the time the guy is done giving away every secret, he decides to abuse Jester while insulting the other puppets. You know, the murderous ones who have done all of the actual work here. And like any pissed off being that's tormented, they turn on their master and torture him to death. It's sweet, heartfelt, and a nice wholesome ending where one's comeuppance is due. Like a moral lesson in a Disney flick where it's the friends we made along the way. And oh, don't be a dick. And like any good businessman, Band made sure to add a cliffhanger. This is in the form of Megan, who brings the stuffed dog of Dana back to life. Knowing more about the work being done at the hotel than she let on, and what she found in Andre's diary, she might be calling the shots with the puppets going forward. Of course, this was abandoned as she starts off dead in the sequel, but it keeps the ending open to have the puppets out and about. I won't pretend like there isn't a sprinkling of nostalgia about it. Still, when you have a fun, schlocky, and horny movie about shifty psychics, killer puppets, and an over-the-top villain ending, I feel like it's going to transcend above the stale and boring every time. That's why I'm here today talking about Puppet Master. A kid stumbled upon some cool cover art for some random horror movie long ago and took a chance. What transpired became a lifelong love of the weird cult films that tried their damnedest, swung hard, and sometimes missed. 1989 started what would ultimately be a short-lived era, but one that influenced a whole generation. We have toys, comics, a video game, and sequels galore. All because Charles Band knew an eye-catching poster could do a lot of heavy lifting. And back we are, we've come full circle, back in the video aisle once again, looking for anything in what seems like every choice in the world. I miss it, but I also know it's just a product of a different time. It was a simpler time, sure, and there's a beauty in the simplicity of it all, but it's just the mind's way of looking back. As I reflect back on those moments, I realize how fortunate I am to have been a part of that era, to have cut my teeth on the cult phenomenon that would shape my love for the genre. Full Moon's epic reign may have been short-lived, but in those 6 glorious years, they gifted us with a treasure trove of classics, and at the forefront of it all was Puppet Master, a film that kicked off a legacy of weird and wonderful storytelling. And as much as I cherish those moments, I also embrace the ever-expanding landscape of horror. And while I may miss the simplicity of the video store era, unlike Jack Shepherd, we can't go back. More options means more opportunities, and I want the biggest tent possible. So here's to Puppet Master and the countless other classics that continue to fuel our passion for horror.
Shout it out with Tom Savini, master of horror effects.
Tom Savini really put it the best. Tom would always say he's a magician. And he would say, when I get hired, I go to set with my bag of tricks and I'm doing magic tricks through people. It's all misdirection.
In addition to all of those issues of Fangoria, there was another fine bit of reading that helped contribute to my outrageous love of gore effects. 80s kids will remember Tom Savini's legendary book Bizarro, which, along with a documentary called Scream Greats, Tom Savini, really showed us how the blood sausage got made. Savini would go through the gory bits of just about every one of his movies and tell us how he made it look like someone had just been knocked off in the nastiest way possible. From Dawn of the Dead to Friday the 13th, to lesser-known slashers like The Prowler and Eyes of a Stranger. Savini lets you know where to hide the needle filled with fake blood, how to convincingly chop off a head, or, in some extreme cases, how to blow someone away with a shotgun. Those stunts weren't advised for all of us playing along at home, but the other stuff seemed relatively doable. What Savini was doing, whether he knew it or not, was creating a small army of future gorehounds. And how can you not love him for it? I mean, here's a guy so awesome that he blew his own head off in the trash classic Maniac. Maybe part of the man's charm was just that, his charm. Far from being a bug-eyed cretin who wanted to ruin all sense of decency in the world, Savini always came off as an intelligent and introspective man. He took a clever and thoughtful approach to the cinematic horrors that he was creating, and he was also never shy when it came to speaking about his time in Vietnam, where the atrocities of war would later serve as inspiration for the imaginary wounds that he'd go on to create. I was such a nerd for special effects that I actually saw some of Savini's handiwork in his Scream Greats documentary, before I actually saw the movies themselves. Day of the Dead is an example. I still hadn't seen the film, but I already knew about the horrors that it contained, such as Greg Nicotiro's severed head, and of course, the brutal demise of Captain Rhodes. Big time spoilers, sure, but I didn't care at the time. I was just so enamored with the art form. But before I even knew who Tom Savini was, I saw George Romero's monumental Dawn of the Dead, a film that was formative for me, an assault on the senses because of the human drama and the sheer excess of violence. It felt like it was created by some kind of mad genius. And of course it was. And it made such an impression on me that I watched it again immediately after the first viewing was over. Now, I could talk all day about the overall impact that that movie had on me, but let's focus on the contributions of Savini for a moment. Like a lot of youngins back in those days, I did not know the word squib. Hadn't even really thought about how bullet holes were made and what were clearly actors and stuntmen. I just accepted it as Hollywood magic. But when I saw Dawn of the Dead with its barrage of bullets making mincemeat out of humans and zombies alike, something went off in my brain. It all looked so real, so gross, but in an awesome way. Suddenly something clicked, and I had to know how they did it. Add to that the movie's other magnificent freakout moments, a zombie having his head sawed off by a propeller, guts being ripped out, and flesh constantly being turned into brisket, and I was truly hooked. The reality of the movie and the need to know just how the hell they did all of that was effortlessly linked in my head. I had seen plenty of horror movies before, but none had the sheer impact that Dawn did up till that point. And while of course I was captivated by the characters and the absurd comedy horror drama that they found themselves in, I had to credit all of those disgusting wounds and head explosions for truly capturing my imagination. How did they do that? That's what I asked myself. Lo and behold, I eventually stumbled upon the answer in the forms of that Bizarro book and the Scream Greats doc, which, lucky for me, was rentable at my local video store. My wide open eyes were opened even wider, and an entire world of bloody wonders were splattered upon me. There was this guy, Tom Savini, who did most of the work himself. Not only that, I discovered he was actually in the movie, playing one of the villainous bikers who ruin everything for everybody in the movie's fantastic and tragic third act. This guy did his own stunts when he wasn't obliterating skulls. I mean, how damn cool is that? And here was something even cooler. It turned out that he was responsible for creating some of the bloodshed in a couple other horror flicks that I had already seen. The big one was Friday the 13th, which was always on cable somewhere when I was a kid. While not nearly as epic or influential as Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th was a favorite. It's not scary when you watch it now, but when you're a young one, that movie packs quite the punch. And most of that punch comes via the gnarly deaths that we're privy to. I don't know about you, but Kevin Bacon getting that arrow in the throat shocked the fuck out of me, and provided another instance of my young, impressionable self going, how is that even possible? Thanks to Tom Savini's book, I had the answer. As mentioned earlier, Tom wasn't shy about sharing some, if not all, of his secrets. I couldn't get enough of that ghastly catnip. Then there was young Jason. Or the ghost of Jason, was it? Or the deformed boy himself? I didn't know. All I knew was that his appearance scared the crap out of me, and the effect would not have been so troubling had it not been for Savini's excellent design. The fact that we don't see his face for very long made it all the more disturbing. My young mind thought, however briefly, that there must have been a kid out there who looked just like that. But no, that was mere movie magic, or movie madness if you prefer. Speaking of Jason, we have Tom to thank for what is still Jason's greatest quote-unquote death sequence in the final chapter. Seeing Jason unmasked was a pure trip back in the day, and add to that his head sliding down that machete blade while his eyes bulge out, and just, damn man. I mean, who wouldn't want to do stuff like this if you're a movie fanatic at a young age? Watching the Scream Greats documentary was compelling, not only in how it revealed how Savini accomplished all of this gruesomeness, but in how it shined a light on the man himself. Savini was a pretty normal guy, funny and seemingly easy to talk to. If you didn't know any better, he could have been just another Joe on the street. It kind of surprised me that he, not unlike his friend and collaborator George Romero, was anything but a nutcase. Just a regular dude whose job it was to inflict ungodly harm, however fake, on innocent bystanders and creatures alike. The other huge credit in Tom's filmography was Creepshow, still my second favorite Romero movie after Dawn. We knew Savini was more than adept at tearing flesh and sending bullets through bodies, but Creepshow highlighted a different set of skills. This movie had it all. Waterlogged ghouls, Stephen King turned into a moss man, skeletons from the grave, and Fluffy. Fluffy, that lovable crate monster from the Arctic who mauls and eats 3 people. Well, 2 people in Wilma.
You're hysterical.
Fluffy was on another level from what I'd seen Savini do, proving that he had a lot more to him than initially assumed. As with the case with Jason in the Lake, you don't see Fluffy all that much in the crate segment, but what you do see makes an immediate and unforgettable impression. And now, of course, Fluffy's a horror legend. And don't get me started on the horrifying finale of Creepshow, when thousands of roaches burst out of curmudgeonly Upson Pratt in They're Creeping Up on You. You might be surprised to know that when I first saw Creepshow on TV, this segment was completely cut from the movie. It was just simply too gross for network television. So my first glimpse of this nightmarish vision was via that Scream Greats doc. And as you might be able to imagine, I was floored by A, the revelation that I had not seen all of Creepshow, and B, the absolutely revolting sight of all of these roaches digging their way out of a rather realistic mock-up of actor E.G. Marshall. I'm no fan of roaches. I mean, who is? So this segment still creeps me out to this day, but it's a tremendous piece of work by all involved, and having it end in such hideous fashion is a hoot. Savini built that dummy of E.G. Marshall, and it's a complete success. Never for a second does it look anything but real. Savini and Romero made one believe that many bugs could hide inside of a man before heading for the exits. And I'm still not sure if I should be grateful or spiteful of that. Who am I kidding? I loved it then and I still do now. Only Tom can make being grossed out so much fun.
I have a very interesting history with Creepshow because that was the first job offer I ever got on a movie. You know, I was friends with George and his wife at the time and Tom Savini, and when they got the green light to make Creepshow, I was 17. I was about to go off to college and I went to visit. And George said, "Hey man, we're doing Creepshow. Do you want a job? You want to come work?" And I said, "Oh my God, are you kidding? I would love to, but I can't because, you know, it's the summertime and I'm going to start, I start college in September." That's where I met Tom Savini. It was one of those visits to the set of Creepshow. So George kind of said, look, you have an open invite, come anytime. So I used to go on Saturdays to the Stages, which was a transformed high school gymnasium in Monroeville. And Tom would be there working, and I would go and sit in his lab, hang out with him. So that's how Tom Savini and I developed our friendship. So Creepshow was something that was very near and dear to me. So I was like #1 Creepshow fan club guy. I would have, because I felt like sort of a weird kind of ownership to it, because I'd been invited and I was on set. I was like, oh, my Creepshow.
Another one of Tom's beloved creatures is that adorable little girl hiding in the walls in his Tales from the Dark Side episode, Inside the Closet. Holy hell, imagine being an adolescent and feasting your eyes on that gal. This was an episode Savini directed, and he did so quite masterfully, building suspense and a comfortably eerie vibe before paying things off with a shocker of a finale. The initial image of that monstrous Muppet will forever be seared into my mind, and in fact, when we see her interact with her doting father, played by Creepshow's own Fritz Weaver, it's a sequence so creepy that I'm still talking to my shrink about it. Oh yeah, my shrink is named Jack Daniels, by the way. Savini had a promising directing career that never quite took off the way I'm sure he wanted it to. But we're forever grateful for the small sample that he did deliver. His remake of Night of the Living Dead is still an underrated gem, with some of the finest zombie makeup you'll ever see, and a gloomy atmosphere that chills to the bone. It would take a video at least 3 times the length of this one to explain all of the ways in which Tom Savini shaped not only my horror-loving life, but plenty of others. There's no arguing that he's a hugely influential person in the genre, but I'm not sure we appreciate just how much. Let's think of it this way. It's widely acknowledged that we would not have the zombie genre as we know it without George Romero, but you could go one further and say that Tom Savini is just as responsible for how popular it's become these last few decades. After all, his protege, Greg Nicotero, is pretty much the main man presiding over the Walking Dead universe. And who really knows if we'd have this version of Greg Nicotero without Savini? And he's still making monsters today, if not ones that appear on screen, then ones behind the scenes. As a teacher, Savini has taught hundreds of students who've gone on to add to the legacy of cinematic terrors. As long as he's around, he'll help craft haunting memories for all of those who still enjoy seeing a little practical mayhem being flung across the screen. Memories that extend well beyond the 80s, but make no mistake, Mr. Savini is a huge part of our 80s horror memories and our nightmares.
Friday the 13th, Part 8. Jason takes Manhattan. New York has a new problem. Rated R. Starts Friday, July 28th at theaters everywhere.
What could I possibly say about Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees that hasn't been said ad nauseum, save the fact that they hold a place in the horror pantheon for a reason, because they've been a stalwart vanguard for what we as 80s filmgoers loved.
July 28, 1989. We were promised that Jason Voorhees would stab his way through the Big Apple and take Manhattan. But boy, were we sorely mistaken. Releasing just over a year after Part 7, Manhattan made money, but not nearly as much compared to its predecessors. The series had 8 entries during the decade, which was by far the most out of the aforementioned Big 3. The movie acts as a sort of closing act to a Jason trilogy. No, not the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. You know, the better trilogy. The one I'm referring to is the supernatural Jason arc that was also toned down way too much to appease the MPAA. While Part 6 embraces the silliness from the word go and its wonderful James Bond intro, and Part 7 wanted to go full in on the full tilt psychic battle, Part 8 loses its way and identity while also being just a toned down version of better entries. It had the highest budget of any Friday movie at that time of production, and had Paramount given the extra budget and gone with the original screenplay, we would have actually gotten a hell of a lot more of Jason taking the Big Apple by storm. The movie itself follows Jason being woken up from his watery grave by electricity, and then we simply follow him on his usual murder spree. He gets onto a cruise ship that is taking a graduating class into New York, and the movie follows like they threw darts at a random board of people, places, and weapons to kill with. Think almost like a Clue version of Friday the 13th, which should have been a lot more fun. He dwindles down the characters one by one, then follows the survivors into New York City proper. It does try and keep a quasi-psychic thread going, with the main final girl, Rennie, seeing visions of Jason both young and old. The final survivors ended up defeating Jason in toxic waste, and the movie ends without a stinger, and Paramount without a franchise. They sold the rights to New Line after, who gave it a go with 3 more sequels. Hey, at least Kane Hodder had a good time. Watched in a vacuum, the movie is fine, and a fun piece of 80s slasher canon, and maybe it's a Friday movie that speaks to you from time to time to throw on. Watch it in order in a marathon though, and it adds nothing to the series at large. My friend Mark and I decided to run the series over the course of 2 days using the tube TV and VCR that he had in his garage. We had a blast through the first 4, but day 2 definitely had its ups and downs. As we got closer to the end of the line, Part 8 is objectively disappointing, and a sour way to end the run in the same way that this movie was a sour way to end the Voorhees run in the 80s. While Jason Takes Manhattan is the worst slasher sequel of 1989, it certainly wasn't the only one. We only had to fall asleep and look to our dreams, or nightmares rather, to see that. Releasing a month after his hockey mask companion and future fight partner, A Nightmare on Elm Street: The Dream Child would give us the typical amazing poster, but fall short when it was released to theaters on August 11th, 1989. It made money, sure, with $22 million on an $8 million budget, but that was also the worst for the series up to that point, even if it was the highest grossing slasher of the year. The poster was made before the script was even finalized, so as cool as it looked, you had every right to be confused when you looked at it. The writers were too, apparently. The movie could have been very different for us too, as none other than Stephen King was approached to write and direct, but unfortunately turned it down. Thorn cult aside, and boy will we get into that in a little bit, Freddy has always been the more outlandish killer of the 3. Jason is overtly supernatural after the 4th movie, and Michael clearly comes back to life after every film. Freddy, though, he is a ghost demon who attacks and kills you, often graphically and bizarrely in your dreams, and you never wake up. He is by far the most inherently frightening of the 3, based on how he gets to you. As a kid, Halloween was the first series I started, and it still is my favorite. Friday the 13th is not scary, but works great as a series of popcorn slashers, and I always wanted to throw them on every now and then for a fun time. A Nightmare on Elm Street, though, was the first series that truly scared me. Part 3 in particular gave me, well, it gave me nightmares for a good bit, and even though Freddy would lean further and further into humorous territory, I still found him frightening. Robert Englund would again play Krueger, and his makeup was altered yet again. While not completely overhauled like in films past, it was made to give him an older appearance, and it looks pretty good throughout. Robert Englund's sans makeup appears in the movie during the scene where Krueger is conceived, and he had a great time with showing up and giving a little knowing wink to the audience. Dream Child follows some continuity from the previous one, similar to Part 4 opening with the survivors of Part 3. This time, however, Freddy is attempting to get his revenge and come back into the real world through the unborn child of Alice and Dan. From unleashing Freddy from within to Dream Warriors and Dream Masters, adding a Dream Child seems like the logical thing to do. What is interesting, especially for a slasher film in the late 80s, is the low body count. Would you believe that it's only 3? Those three do their best to be memorable too, with Dan getting turned into a hybrid vehicle before it was cool, Greta being fed parts of herself, and Mark getting snipped up as a comic book character. But 3? That's a light load even in a series that doesn't hold its hat on number of kills, and it's still the fewest in the franchise. It does keep in line with some of the more over-the-top moments of murder perpetrated by Freddy, but oh, we could have had so much more if not for the MPAA threatening an X rating at every turn. The movie wasn't popular then, and even though it has gained popularity in the 35 years since it has released, it is still seen as a miss for the franchise as a whole. Freddy being reborn or the movie having to do with a baby was attempted in scripts as early as Part 2, but didn't come to fruition until Part 5. While it's cool that they were able to finally work it into a film, the performance and overall opinion of this movie would spell the end of the series after the next entry, appropriately titled Freddy's Dead.
And now, that's over.
From one Part 5 to another, 1989 would also see the release of Halloween 5 on, ironically, Friday, October 13th. Much like his other slasher contemporaries, this movie would not do well, and would be the least profitable in the Halloween series to date, with only $11 million at the box office on a $5 million budget. Also, like Nightmare 5, this is a direct sequel to Part 4, and follows survivors Jamie Lloyd and her foster sister Rachel trying to pick up the pieces after Michael attacks the town, going after his niece Jamie. Yes, much like the polarizing decision to make Laurie Strode related to Michael in Part 2, they keep the familial bloodline angle in this new set of films too. The movie was almost very different to what we got, with the old hermit in the beginning being a younger guy named Dr. Death. He even has a Frankenstein motif of him bringing Michael Myers back to life. This was filmed, along with a few other scrapped angles that can be seen online or in documentaries about the movie or series as a whole. Another big change was originally Michael and Jamie were both going to be the killers, something that makes sense after Part 4 had Jamie partially recreate the beginning of the first movie as the ending of that film. She kills her foster mother, and Loomis fears that the cycle has started over, with her taking the mantle of the emotionless mass killer. But we got a page out of Jason's book and were handed a psychic link between Michael and Jamie. The movie had a lot of problems, unfortunately, with director Dominique Autun-Girard seemingly angering everyone on set and ignoring safety protocols, or even movie logic for that matter. Donald Pleasance was unhappy with not only the direction of the film, but also with the direction that his character took in using Jamie to get Michael, and how crazy he had seemingly become. Much like the other two sequels of 1989, this movie ran into the biggest slasher of the 1980s, the MPAA.
In the 80s, like, we got a lot of great horror icons, right? You got Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. I'm very curious, and I hope to be proven wrong, but I'm not sure whether we can create those kinds of icons today in the culture as it exists, because the attention span is so ephemeral and all over the place, and there's so much bombardment of information. We're always looking for the newest and next best thing, as opposed to finding both comfort and interest in something that is a foundational thing, and seeing someone come back. I mean, even we're not looking for Mission Impossible because of Tom Cruise necessarily. We just want to see the stunts. There's nothing about that character that is really, okay, whatever. You could put anybody in that role. That's why Bond is interchangeable. It's the stunts. But horror icons from the 80s, it's about the horror icon. You want to see that character doing what they do in either a new environment or in a new way, but you want to see them. I'm not sure whether we can do that again. I hope we can. I hope we can find a way to have it, because the moment you try to create a horror icon, just that thought, you've already failed. You literally already failed, because you're not coming into the room through the right door. You have to come through the story and the character and the reason for them to exist, and then they have to earn the right to be a member of that pantheon. And, what would you say the last character that's entered that pantheon would be? Like, I can't think of one that I'm like, yeah. See, the fact that we're all going,
Despite the changes to both Loomis and Jamie's characters, the biggest shift and weirdest part of the movie is the introduction of the Man in Black, which leads to the Thorn cult angle of the next movie. It's a plot point that comes out of nowhere and bookends the typical walking speed kill spree with the opening that forgets the implications of the end of the preceding film. For all of the grief that this film gets, and if I had to guess, I'd have no doubt in my head that it's the least favorite of most people amongst the three. I have quite the soft spot for this movie. I actually bought this from Blockbuster Music, sight unseen, on VHS with my own money in the late 90s. I had worked my way through the series to that point and had just recently returned my rental of Part 4 to trusty old Video Unlimited. I watched it, didn't love it, but it was mine and the first horror movie I ever paid for myself, and would watch it all the time, regardless of how much I actually enjoyed it. While the three franchises had also released movies the year prior in 1988, those all performed well, or at least better than doing the same strategy did in 1989. None of these are without merit to watch, and all have entertainment value to them. But it was hard to watch our three icons push their series, and the 80s as a whole, out with a whimper rather than a bloody bang. The three stalkers would all come back in the 90s and beyond with varying degrees of enjoyment and success, but here they will be forever filed under the bad horror sequels of 1989.
So IP, intellectual property. Why so many sequels? Because marketing is so expensive to penetrate the din out there that's trying to get your entertainment time and dollar. So that's why you see all these movies, because people think, like, I don't want to see a movie about a Magic 8 Ball, but people think, oh, people know what Magic 8 Ball is. We've just cut out $10 million of getting people to understand what this movie is. I don't necessarily think that's true, and I think that with Ari Aster and a bunch of other filmmakers, you're starting to see that the fresh and original takes are the ones that people are gravitating towards because there's mystery behind them. There's, oh, that's a premise I haven't even heard about. It doesn't have to be associated with like Magic Viewfinder. It's like, this is something interesting that's unique, and it's about a human trauma or condition. It's something accessible that we can understand as people, not as things or as consumers. And I think that's hopefully where we're heading, where it's no longer about easily identified characters that we had from our childhood, but it's about characters that we as a collective have created so that our children have things that they find culturally specific to them that they want to carry to the future. That's our job as storytellers now, is to give the younger generation what we got from the 80s, which is all the icons that matter to us and that we've been carrying the ball. It's time to hand the baton, not with something old, but let's give them something new.
The time is coming for Billy to take his place. In society, it's all about fitting in.
Having had an affinity towards slasher flicks for the decade, Society has all the 80s flair, but its story is still relevant. After all, the idea of class struggle isn't exactly new. We've seen this paranoia in classics like The Thing, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and films like The Mist. And history can undoubtedly attest that human beings turn against each other and mistreat others much too often. In this modern age, information travels rapidly, making it all too easy to spread conspiracy theories and the like. Frankly, rewatching the classic Yuzna film, I'm just thankful that the oddballs that inhabit this flick do not have any Facebook group page exposure. Can you imagine the kind of posts a dude who can pull his head out of his ass would be publishing? Society tells the story of a rich kid, Bill Whitney, who suspects something odd is happening with his wealthy family. After all, they treat him as the family's black sheep, while his sister Jenny gets all the positive reinforcement. I'm sure many of y'all can relate to this. I know a few times I felt that way. But hey, I'll keep my own trauma to myself and get back to the movie. Bill is a relatable bloke, and he's played rather well by General Hospital regular Billy Warlock. We'll go into the actor's horror connections later. And yes, his family is super fucking weird. As Bill seeks answers to his fears and frustrations from his psychiatrist, Dr. Cleveland, he realizes that his paranoia is growing. Things get even more uncomfortable as his parents show clear annoyance at the type of friends Bill is making, as well as shutting out Jenny's ex, David Blanchard. Yet, David seems to be aware of something sinister, and he is desperate to let people know. He approaches Bill, and this only begins the young man's disturbing dive into the rabbit hole of gory frights. Soon, anyone who questions the members of society dies. And when I say die, it's usually in pretty horrendous ways. Whether it's a major car accident or a sliced neck, somebody wants to keep our hero in the dark. They even seemingly put him in the location of every crime scene. It appears it can be much more dangerous for teenagers at Beverly Hills 90210 than we initially believed. As the mystery unfolds, we discover that Bill may not have been wrong. The final act in this gruesomely gooey tale goes in a different direction that pushes the limits. Similar to the more recent Infinity Pool, another movie about the rich taking full advantage, or even Carpenter's classic The Thing, we see some intensely horrific images courtesy of Screaming Mad George. The Japanese effects artist created some of the most inspiring and original visual effects, making Society something genuinely fantastic. The shunting scene is one for the ages. Society is an over-the-top look at classism and the ridiculous behavior of those who can get away with it. And holy hell, that final act is something that viewers will have burned into their retinas.
So Society, one thing that I've done in my career is I've reached out to people that have influenced me. I remember I reached out to David Lynch and Darren Aronofsky. I also reached out to the director of Society because when I saw the shunting for the first time, I was like, this guy is a goddamn genius. He is a fucking national treasure, and I need to meet him. I think that a lot of times you watch a movie or you watch the first 15 minutes and you think you know where it's going. Like, you're like, okay, I know what this movie is. With Society, I had no fucking clue. And I think that it went places, and I saw visuals in that film that I was not expecting when I first turned it on. Society is a movie that I found recently. It's not a movie that I saw back in the day. I think I saw it maybe 10 years ago for the first time. And I was really kind of impressed by the message, or basically the digs it was taking at the time. You take this bigger than life shunting thing of sex and debauchery, and this grotesque, they melted into each other, but it's making a point on the aristocrats, the rich, the 1%. I think it's probably one of my favorite discoveries of the last decade. It's something that I try to show people. That, and a movie called Parents. It's another recent discovery of mine, which I fucking love. One of my favorite cannibal movies ever. But the Society, I think, is just it's pure what the fuck with a message in it, and I think that's awesome.
While the film takes its story of a strange cult with alarming sexual practices, it finds an intelligent balance between the creepy and the ridiculous. It's one of the many reasons this little feature has found fans well after its initial and delayed ultimate release on the movie-going public. Having been raised on horror, I feel fortunate enough to have witnessed the birth of some of the greatest villains in the genre. As we come to a close on our nostalgic trip down a fright-filled decade of the terrifying and the bizarre, Society is a perfect culmination of a decade that brought us Gordon Gekko. As a kid growing up somewhere in the middle class, it was easy to see the haves compared to the have-nots. While movie fans appreciate all film, including flicks like Wall Street, it was easy to see that the greed is good character represented a potent percentage of the population. Perhaps growing up with a little less toys than others gave me pause to idolize folks like Gekko. I mean, don't get me wrong, Michael Douglas is brilliant in the role, but real guys that are like him kinda suck. A lot. Personally, I was far more sympathetic to Charlie Sheen's Bud Fox. It's easy to get seduced by wealth, but not getting fully taken in by it and holding on to one's ethics is far more impressive. But let's leave the commentary of Reaganomics for another time. The themes of wealth and abuse of the lower class are certainly a part of society, but this Brian Usna film piles on the absurd gore for an unforgettable third act. Let's get back to the groovy beasts that Screaming Mad George brought us. Having been a massive fan of Reanimator and From Beyond, I was excited to check out this flick. Even though I didn't get to see it on my video shelf until the early 90s, Society perfectly captured the essence of what horror became as the 80s came to a close. When I was browsing through the video store shelves, debating whether or not I wanted to rewatch one of the classics, the cover art for this feature caught my attention. In the background, a well-dressed gentleman stands in the back of what is seemingly a beautiful woman, pulling her face off of her skull.
Society is examining something in society that few people want to talk about, be it social differences, caste differences, cultural differences. It's such an incredible way to externalize all of the otherness that we project on people who are different than us. And then having come from a community that was a bit more upper crust, yeah, they do inbreed. They do stick together, literally.
I thought I'd seen it all as a kid. The Nightmare on Elm Street series alone had some of the weirdest kills, let alone all of the other odd flicks that gave genre fans thrills. And with Brian Usna producing both Reanimator and From Beyond, you know the dude thrives on the utterly outrageous. Even knowing that witnessing the shunting scene was one of the few moments my jaw dropped to the floor while watching a horror flick, it left me in shock and awe, as well as the outrageous nature of it all. It had such grotesque beauty that it made me appreciate this unique paranoia-laced horror ride. It was all the more exhilarating. It's a movie moment that will leave you wondering, what the fuck am I watching right now? And yes, that's a massive compliment. Before picking it up at the video store, all I knew about the flick was that it was from the producer of Reanimator. I also knew the leading actor, Billy Warlock, from the soap opera General Hospital. During the 80s, people really loved their soaps. And frankly, as an idealistic fanboy with a penchant for gore, the box cover sold it instantly. Being a horror-obsessed middle-class kid with a penchant for frightful things in a religious area was certainly an interesting experience, especially when you had a sleepover and the family in question didn't want you to watch the scary movies on TV because they wanted to watch some inspirational shit. At least it gave me some fun memories. I went home early that night to watch the movie that I wanted to. The family in question was also the wealthiest in the neighborhood. Their young son used to brag about it often. Frankly, watching Society at an early age made me question what would have happened if I had stayed to watch whatever flick that they were watching. Society is one of the most outrageous B-movie outings that I've had the pleasure of watching. It is creepy, unsettling, and twistedly engaging, and all the performances are spot on. This cult classic perfectly captures the decade in a fun and freaky way. Watching this again in the messed up world we happen to be a part of is just as relevant and wild as it was upon its initial release. Society is for horror film fans that thrive on something original. While movies like Slither, Infinity Pool, They Live, The Thing, and many others brilliantly use body horror and a little humor to tell their fantastic stories, this Brian Usna classic manages to offer the same energy and brilliantly examines the 80s, with some shunting to bring it all home. As we come to the end of arguably one of the most influential and thriving decades of the horror genre, Society feels like a perfect story to share. If you haven't joined, you most assuredly need to seek this one out. As far as this guy is concerned, it may be one of the most important films to show audiences how original and thrilling horror can be. Thanks for watching, and make sure you join Society, because Society waits for you.
From Wes Craven, creator of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Shocker. Rated R. Starts Friday at a theater near you.
Here we are at the end of 1989, the end of the road. Throughout this series, we have reminisced about all of the horror films that made us into the fine folks that we are today, as well as the influential filmmakers behind them. We began with Sean S. Cunningham taking us to the doomed Camp Crystal Lake in Friday the 13th. Then Tobe Hooper scaled down the gore and replaced it with spooks the whole family can enjoy with Poltergeist. Wes Craven gave us a nightmare that will last forever with Freddy Krueger. And John Carpenter tried to open our eyes to the world around us with They Live. But in this list of the greats, one man in particular had the most impact on me from childhood to the present. For our last trip down memory lane of the decade of decadence, let's remember the man who told us to remember it's only a movie. He showed us how to defeat evil in the hills, took us to Haiti to see a little voodoo, warned us never to fall asleep, and more importantly, asked us, what's our favorite scary movie? However, one film of his in particular not only closes out the 80s, but also often gets overlooked in his grand filmography. Before jumping into Shocker, I want to discuss the man behind the film. Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street was a pivotal film in my childhood. Even before seeing it, I already knew about Freddy Krueger and how he killed teenagers in their dreams. I have my dad and siblings to thank for that. Sometimes I would take my mom's workout gloves, place butter knives on top of my fingers, put on a random colored striped shirt, and run around outside. Needless to say, my mom wasn't too happy about my obsession with a fictional child killer. I remember seeing a commercial for a 900 number that you could call to speak to Freddy, which I'm pretty sure was just an automated message, and I wanted to call it. My mom took her chance to finally scare me away from this movie by pretending to call it for me. When she handed me the phone, Freddy was on the other line, saying my name and sounding evil as hell. I dropped the phone and took my scared ass under the blankets. I didn't know then my dad was actually on the second phone in the bedroom, doing his best Krueger voice to trick me. Did it terrify me? Sure. Did my mom's plan work? Nope. Freddy was a pop culture phenomenon. People of all ages knew who he was, and Wes's imagination brought him into the real world. There was another film of his that I used to watch as a child, not even knowing that he had directed it. When my siblings used to babysit me, I would often stay up with them well past my bedtime and watch scary movies. For years, I had this one memory of watching a movie with them involving a teenage girl acting like a robot and making some weird beeping noise, sounding like the Roadrunner. As a kid, I loved it. But I can't tell you how frustrating it was to remember the movie's title. After years, and I mean years of searching on Google, I had given up and wondered if I had just made up the memory. Finally, Scream Factory released Craven's 1986 film Deadly Friend just a few years ago. You have no idea what joy and relief I felt when my decades-long search ended. Now, on to Shocker. I would be lying if I told you that I saw this movie as a kid when it came out. The unfortunate fact is that I'm sure most of us could say the same, since it bombed so hard. Yes, Craven had several films in the 80s, but it was the 90s when I actually knew his name. The People Under the Stairs is the film to thank for that. It was something that was always on TV and would scare the crap out of me and my best friends. So of course I would seek out other things at the video store that he did, and Shocker is one that caught my eye. I've talked for almost 50 episodes now about how movies back then could be simply chosen because of the box art, and Shocker was definitely one of those. Even the film's title was badass. In case you haven't seen it yourself, Shocker follows Horace Pinker, a TV repairman by day and murderous psychopath by night. His rampage escalates when he targets the home of Lieutenant Parker, the lead investigator on his case, ruthlessly claiming the lives of Parker's wife and 2 of his foster children. Meanwhile, Jonathan, Parker's remaining son, experiences inexplicable connections to Pinker through his dreams. Utilizing these eerie visions, Jonathan guides his father and a team of officers to Pinker's place of business. During a violent shootout resulting in the loss of multiple officers, Pinker manages to evade capture and seeks vengeance by targeting Jonathan's girlfriend, Allison. Exploiting the opportunity while Jonathan is engaged in practice, Pinker mercilessly takes Allison's life, cruelly deeming it a birthday present. Driven by his link to Pinker, Jonathan and his father pursue the killer to a residential location, apprehending Pinker in the midst of another heinous act. Following a confrontation and arrest, Pinker faces execution in the electric chair. Having made a pact with the devil for supernatural abilities, Pinker returns from death by becoming pure energy, possessing unsuspecting individuals to continue his reign of terror. Only through Jonathan's strategic planning does a solution emerge. And that, my friends, is when this film really goes bonkers.
Shocker is a film that I think is underrated in so many ways. I think I had an opportunity to talk to Wes Craven about it many times, and some of the challenges of making that movie, because certainly the sequence at the end where Horace Pinker chases the hero through a series of different actual real TV shows and everything was a really unique thing to do at that time, and very challenging. And I know Wes had a lot of challenges with the visual effects at that time, as I think the visual effects artist, the original person who did it, whose name I don't know and wouldn't say anyway, sort of lost the plot a little bit, and promised Wes that everything would show up. And the day that he was going to show everything to Wes, he basically just left the studio, and Wes sitting in there wondering where he'd gone, and he had nothing. And they had bits of film hidden all over town and things like that, and Wes had to hire all these other visual effects artists to go around and find little pieces of shots that were partially done, and they had almost no time. So it was, the fact that it was a technical feat for that time is amazing. The fact that it was a technical feat that was accomplished under extraordinary circumstances that they went through is amazing.
After A Nightmare on Elm Street, Craven wanted to distance himself from the series, apart from Dream Warriors. He didn't care for his creation's direction and made the Dream Warriors as a way to finish the series. But alas, that was not the case. And the idea for Shocker was birthed as a response. The idea caught the attention of Alive Films, the team behind They Live, amongst several others, and the movie was released just months after A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The intent was to create a franchise to out-Freddy Freddy, while having full control over the series. Unfortunately, the film's failure squashed all plans for future sequels. But why was it such a misfire?
I think it didn't quite connect the same way, because there is a primal thing of Freddy attacking you in your nightmares, and that I think speaks to a much more historical and something that's in us from the dawn of time, whereas I think Shocker was very much of the moment.
Perhaps looking at it from a more mature point of view, the film is tonally all over the place. The first half plays it pretty seriously with Pinker's brutal killings, but once he gets electrocuted at the halfway mark, that's when the film gets pretty damn silly.
You got it, baby.
Pinker throws out one-liners like he's Freddy in the sequels, possesses an armchair, and even has a chase through TV land. And yes, there are even dream sequences. Craven just seemed unable to escape that motif. Shit, he even has some of them in Deadly Friend. So maybe audiences were simply getting tired of the same old. But as a kid in the 90s, this movie rocked. I didn't care if it took a violent Looney Tunes route. It was fun and had a kick-ass soundtrack. Plus, I was a kid. I'm sure one thing that most people would agree on, though, is that the soundtrack rocks. The producer from Alive Films came from a hard rock background, working with folks like Meat Loaf and Alice Cooper, which is probably why Cooper was in the Alive-produced Prince of Darkness. So, of course, the soundtrack would consist of rock and metal. First, you have Megadeth covering Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy. And you also have quite possibly the most excellent theme song ever by supergroup The Dudes of Wrath. That band consisted of members of Whitesnake, Motley Crue, and Kiss. Since my older siblings babysat me quite a bit, 80s hair metal was my jam. This was something that my friends would make fun of me for by the time I reached high school in the 90s, but that did not matter to me. The theme song is like an earworm. If you listen to it once, you'll catch yourself randomly singing the word shocker in a bad Paul Stanley voice. As for Horace Pinker, Mitch Pileggi owns this role. In contrast to the things that didn't completely work, Pileggi's performance is what the film got right. He's menacing and not merely a one-dimensional villain, but a complex and multifaceted antagonist. He's played with chilling intensity, and yeah, he's kinda funny. Had Craven gotten his way and more sequels followed, it would be damn near difficult to think of someone else playing the character, just like Robert Englund with Freddy. Really, the whole cast is great. You have Peter Berg as Jonathan, Ted Raimi, and Michael Murphy. Oh, and John Tesh is there too. As things go with box office bombs, Shocker found some life on physical media over the years. Thank God for companies like Scream Factory to give our films the treatment they deserve and reintroduce forgotten gems to the public. In fact, I hear about it more today than I did when I was younger. It's talked about quite a bit on SiriusXM's Liquid Metal, which always makes me smile. Even though I personally think the movie is great, that doesn't mean it's not flawed. If there was anything in Craven's filmography that deserves a remake, it would be Shocker. None of this Elm Street remake nonsense. I remember a few years later, I was watching the movie Fallen with Denzel Washington and getting pissed that it was just a clear ripoff of Shocker. Even the guy who gets electrocuted and eventually possesses others looks strikingly like Pinker. Maybe it was unintentional and Shocker was unconsciously cemented into the filmmaker's brains. That's the kind of influence that Wes Craven had. Regardless, I was mad.
I had a great opportunity to work with Wes for 19, 20 years. So, and learn from him and laugh with him and do whatever and disappoint him and rise to the occasion and surprise him and all those things. Disappointed meetings. I'm looking at you, Dracula 2000.
He would go on to revisit Freddy one last time in the amazing Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I remember my mom took me to see this first thing on a Saturday morning. Later that day at my soccer game, I bragged to all the other kids that I got to see it. Then in 1996, I was taken to the most important horror film in my life, Scream. Scream was a celebration of horror movies and came out at just the right time in my life when I understood all the references to the genre. Many horror movies in the mid-90s had grown stale from the abundance the 80s had to bring, but Scream changed the game. It was the film Craven needed to put him back on the map. Craven eventually ventured into a different genre with the Meryl Streep-led and Oscar-nominated Music of the Heart, but horror always called for him for better or worse. Back to Shocker. I'm not going to say his vision was perfect. As an adult who has never seen it, you may even say it's far from great. But for me, I can see past the flaws and feel that same nostalgia that I felt as a child. That's the beauty of the films that I talked about in this series. Every one of them is like a time machine that instantly transports us to a single memory when we first watched it. And for 90 minutes or so, you're a kid again, sitting in your living room watching a movie with the people who are no longer with us. And now, as the circle of life does its thing, a set of new memories in any shape or form can be created to enjoy for years to come. And for that, I want to say thank you to the man responsible for my love of the genre and for making me feel young again. Wes Craven, thank you for making my 80s horror memories a pleasure. Most importantly, thanks to each and every one of you for taking the trip along with me.
To Wes! To Wes!